It was the summer of 2018 when I moved into a new neighborhood in California. The house was beautiful, an old, spacious two-story that had been renovated just enough to retain its vintage charm. The backyard was big, with a large, sparkling swimming pool that glistened in the afternoon sun. It looked perfect, almost too perfect. I had always dreamed of living in a house with a pool, so when I saw the place, I didn't hesitate. Little did I know, this swimming pool would soon become the setting of some of the most horrifying experiences of my life. The first few weeks went by without incident. I spent my evenings lounging by the pool, enjoying the quiet solitude that came with the neighborhood. The pool water was always inviting, and I often swam late at night, letting the stillness of the night wrap around me as I glided through the water. But one night, something changed. It was a Friday evening, and the moon was full. I had just finished my swim and was sitting on the edge of the pool, my feet dangling in the cool water. The air was crisp, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves in the trees around the yard. It was peaceful, too peaceful. That's when I heard it first. It was just a soft splashing sound, like someone was slowly moving through the water. I looked around, but there was no one there. I stood up, scanning the backyard, but everything was still. I told myself it was just the wind, maybe an animal in the bushes. I sat back down, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach, but then the splashing grew louder. I jumped to my feet and turned to the pool. There, in the center of the water, something was moving. It was faint at first, like the ripples were being caused by a person swimming under the surface. I couldn't see anyone, but the water seemed to swirl around something, or someone. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step closer. I could almost hear the soft splashing of the water, as though someone was swimming beneath the surface, just out of sight. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No answer. The splashing stopped for a moment, and then started again, more frantic this time, as though something, or someone, was thrashing beneath the water. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't explain it. There was no way anyone could be in the pool without me seeing them, and then, something truly terrifying happened. A face appeared just beneath the surface of the water, staring up at me. The eyes were wide and empty, as though they had been staring at the bottom of the pool for years. The face was pale and lifeless, the skin an unnatural shade of gray. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, but I couldn't take my eyes off the face. It was as if it was looking directly at me, waiting for me to do something. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, but when I finally turned to run inside, the face disappeared beneath the water, and the splashing stopped completely. The next few nights, I couldn't bring myself to swim in the pool. I stayed inside, even though the sound of the water lapping against the sides of the pool seemed to haunt me. I began hearing the splashing at odd hours of the night, always the same soft, slow splashing, followed by the faintest whispering sound, like someone was just beneath the surface, calling to me. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling grew stronger each night. The sense that I was being watched. The feeling of something, or someone, lurking just beneath the surface of the pool. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront whatever was in the pool. Armed with a flashlight, I stepped into the yard, determined to face the strange presence that had been haunting me. The pool was still, almost too still. The water was as clear as ever, but it felt wrong. I walked to the edge and shined the flashlight into the depths, but I couldn't see anything. There were no shadows moving beneath the water, no signs of any kind of life. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking maybe it had all just been my imagination, but then I heard it. A voice, soft and muffled, coming from the pool. "Help me." I froze. It was a faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. My hands shook as I backed away from the edge of the pool, the beam of the flashlight flickering. "Help me." The voice was clearer now, louder, as though it was coming from right beneath the surface. I stepped back in terror, stumbling over my feet, my mind racing. I wanted to run, but my body refused to move, and then, from the depths of the pool, a hand shot up. It was pale and dripping with water, long fingers reaching out, grasping for something, anything. The hand was followed by the rest of a body, slowly emerging from the pool, water dripping from the soaked figure. The figure that rose from the pool was like nothing I had ever seen. It was a woman, pale, drenched in water, with long, black hair that clung to her face. Her clothes were torn, ragged, as if she had been trapped beneath the water for years. She looked at me with lifeless eyes, her mouth twisted into a grin that made my stomach churn. I screamed, but no sound escaped. The woman stepped closer, her wet feet making soft splashes on the ground, her hand reaching out to me. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't move. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice a chilling rasp. Before I knew what was happening, the woman lunged forward, grabbing my arm with icy fingers. I felt her cold grip tighten around my wrist, pulling me toward the pool. I struggled, kicking and thrashing, but her grip was too strong. As she pulled me closer to the water, I could Feel the cold, wet fingers digging into my skin, dragging me toward the edge. The last thing I remember before I blacked out was the woman's face, inches from mine, her cold breath on my face. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground next to the pool. The woman was gone, and the water was still again, as though nothing had happened. I looked around, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no sign of her. I ran back into the house, locking the door behind me, and never went near the pool again. The next day, I did some research on the house. I found out that it had once belonged to a family that had mysteriously disappeared several years ago. The police had found nothing but a pool of water and a few pieces of torn clothing in the backyard. I never saw the woman again, but every now and then, when I pass the pool, I hear the soft splashing sound. And sometimes, just as I'm about to turn away, I see her face, pale and lifeless, staring at me from beneath the water. I don't know what she wants, but I know one thing for sure, she's still there. The end. Story 2. It was late summer when I moved into the house on Elm Street. After years of living in cramped apartments and dealing with noisy neighbors, I was finally able to afford a house with a backyard. The house, though old, had everything I wanted: spacious rooms, a large living area, and even a swimming pool in the backyard. The pool, however, would come to haunt my nights, in ways I could never have imagined. The first few days were peaceful. I spent most of my time unpacking, enjoying the quiet that came with the house. The backyard, with its tall trees and overgrown bushes, offered a sense of seclusion. It was the perfect place to unwind after a long day. The swimming pool, though old and a little weathered, seemed like a beautiful addition. The water sparkled in the sunlight, inviting me to swim. It was everything I had imagined, until the evening of the third day. It started as a soft noise. I was sitting in the living room, browsing through some old books when I heard it, splashing. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe an animal in the pool. But when I looked out the window, the pool was still, undisturbed by any movement. That night, the noise returned. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. The soft splashing, like someone was swimming in the pool. My heart raced as I got up and walked to the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was making the noise. The backyard was dark, with only the light from the porch illuminating the pool. No one was there. Confused, I dismissed the thought. It must have been the wind or some animal moving in the bushes, I reasoned. I tried to forget about it and went to bed, but the next night, the splashing came back. This time, it was louder, more persistent. I got up, unable to ignore it anymore. I stepped outside, my feet crunching on the gravel path that led to the backyard. The air was thick, and the shadows from the trees stretched long across the yard. The pool, bathed in the soft light of the moon, seemed perfectly still. Yet the sound of splashing continued, as if someone was swimming in the water. I walked toward the pool, feeling a strange unease settle in my chest. There was no one around, no movement in the water, yet the splashing persisted. I stood there for a moment, frozen, listening. It was as if the water itself was alive, reacting to some invisible presence. I had the distinct feeling that I was not alone. I turned and walked back into the house, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but think about the pool. What was causing the splashing? Was I just imagining things, or was something truly out there? The following days were filled with unease. I tried to ignore the pool, but it seemed to haunt me, lurking just beyond the window, casting a shadow over my thoughts. The splashing came and went, sometimes during the day, sometimes at night. It was never loud enough to confirm that someone was actually swimming, but the sound was there, undeniable. One afternoon, after hearing the splashing again, I decided to take action. I needed to know what was causing it, so I went outside and approached the pool. The water was still, the surface unbroken by any movement. I walked around the pool, inspecting the area, but found nothing unusual. I even checked the bushes around the yard, convinced that some animal was hiding there. Nothing, but then I noticed something strange. The ladder leading to the pool was wet, even though it hadn't rained in days. The water droplets on the ladder were fresh, as if someone had just climbed out of the pool. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing, trying to understand what I was seeing. There was no logical explanation for it. No one had been in the pool, and yet the ladder was wet, as though someone had just used it. That night, the splashing was louder than ever. It seemed to echo through the house, waking me from a restless sleep. I got up, determined to finally solve the mystery. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the backyard, the air cooler than usual. The pool was illuminated by the soft light of the moon, but it appeared undisturbed. I could still hear the splashing, but the water was calmed out. I shone the flashlight across the surface of the pool, my hand shaking. And then I saw a figure, just beneath the surface of the water. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was faint, but I could make out the outline of a person, submerged just below the surface. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its presence, as if it was waiting for me to make the next move. Without thinking, I reached out and touched the water. The coldness of it shocked me, but the moment my hand made contact, the figure vanished. The splashing stopped, and the water grew still once again. I backed away from the pool, my heart racing, and ran inside the house. I slammed the door behind me, locking it tightly. I didn't know what I had seen, but I knew I couldn't stay in the house any longer. The next morning, I called a local investigator, hoping to find some explanation for the strange happenings around the pool. The investigator, an older man named Thomas, came over that afternoon to take a look. He inspected the pool and the surrounding area but found no signs of anything unusual. However, he did tell me something that would stay with me forever. "You're not the first person to experience something like this in this neighborhood," Thomas said, his voice low and serious. "Years ago, a family lived in this house. They had a young daughter who loved to swim. One night, she went into the pool alone, and she never came back. They searched for days, but her body was never found." I felt a chill run down my spine as he continued. "Some say she still haunts the pool, waiting for someone to join her. The splashing you hear, it's her, trapped in the water." I didn't want to believe it, but as the days passed, I began to experience more strange occurrences. The splashing continued, louder and more persistent than ever. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I would hear soft whispers coming from the pool, as if someone was calling me. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I packed my things and left, never looking back. The house on Elm Street remained empty, the pool still and silent, but I knew deep down that the girl who had drowned was still there, waiting for someone to join her in the water. The end. Story 3. It was supposed to be a dream project, one that would finally bring my family together again. After a rocky few years filled with loss and emotional strain, I had decided to renovate our new home. The house was old, sitting at the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania. It was big, with creaky floors and a dusty attic, but it had charm. And it was a fresh start for us. The house had been on the market for a long time when we bought it. No one seemed to want it, but the price was right, and with a little work, I believed it could be everything we had hoped for. The backyard was large, perfect for a swimming pool. My wife and I had always dreamed of having one, and the space was more than enough. We hired a contractor and started the project in early summer. The work began smoothly, with the crew digging the hole for the pool and preparing the land. At first, everything seemed normal. The usual noise of heavy machinery, the workers chatting as they moved about, nothing out of the ordinary. But as the day went on, something strange happened. Around mid-afternoon, while they were digging near the center of the yard, the ground seemed to shift unnaturally. A low rumble came from beneath, as if something was stirring far beneath the earth. The workers paused, looking at each other with confused expressions. One of them, an older man named Greg, shrugged it off and continued digging. But then it happened. The ground split open in front of them, and a dark, thick liquid began to ooze from the earth. At first, I thought it was just some kind of underground water pipe leaking, but then I saw the color. It was red. Not a faint red, but the kind of deep crimson that made my stomach churn. The workers stood frozen, staring at the liquid pooling around the hole they had dug. "What the hell is that?" Greg asked, his voice trembling. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I moved closer. The liquid, though thick and unnerving, seemed to pulse, as though something was alive within the earth, pushing it upward. It was as if the very ground had opened up to release something that should have remained hidden. I told the workers to stop and called the contractor over. He arrived a few minutes later, his face turning pale as he looked down at the strange substance. "It's probably some old underground reservoir," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Let's get this cleaned up, and we can continue. It's nothing to worry about." But I wasn't so sure. The liquid didn't look natural, and the way it bubbled unnerved me. I asked them to stop the work for the day and let me think about what to do next. I spent the evening researching, trying to figure out what could have caused such an odd occurrence. It was only then that I stumbled upon a disturbing fact. There had been a well on the property long ago, one that was sealed off decades ago, after a tragic accident that no one seemed to want to talk about. The more I dug into the house's history, the more I uncovered stories of strange events, rumors of an old family that had lived there, and how they had all mysteriously disappeared. The next day, I had the contractor call in a professional to inspect the site. When the specialist arrived, he seemed uncomfortable from the start. He carefully examined the ground, taking samples of the red substance. "This is not what I expected," he said quietly. "I've never seen anything like this before." I watched him work, the unease growing in my chest. After several hours, he finally gave me a grim look and said, "I'm sorry, but we can't proceed. Whatever is under here, it's not just water or chemicals. There's something wrong with this land." Despite his warnings, I decided to continue. I couldn't let fear stop me from making our dream a reality. We had already invested so much. And I wasn't going to back out. That night, after the workers had left, I sat in my living room, my eyes fixed on the yard through the window. The house was eerily quiet. There were no sounds of birds, no rustling of leaves, just silence. And that's when I heard a low, almost imperceptible whisper coming from the direction of the pool site. I tried to dismiss it, convincing myself it was the wind. But the whispering grew louder, more distinct. It sounded like a woman's voice, soft but filled with sorrow, repeating one word over and over, leave. I rushed outside, looking around the yard, but there was nothing. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness. The pool site, now covered with a tarp, seemed to pulse in the moonlight. I went back inside, locking the door behind me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something far beyond a simple construction project. The next few days were a blur of strange occurrences. At night, I'd hear footsteps outside my window, but when I checked, no one was there. The workers continued digging, but each day, the pool site seemed to look more and more disturbed. The ground around the area looked uneven, as if something had been shifting below. And the smell, there was a faint, metallic odor that lingered in the air, like rust and decay. Then, one afternoon, while I was home alone, I decided to go out and inspect the progress. I had a bad feeling in my gut, but I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that something was wrong. As I stepped outside, I noticed that the tarp covering the pool site had shifted. The ground beneath it was now completely cracked open, and the red liquid had spilled over the edges, staining the dirt. I couldn't bring myself to approach it. I turned to leave, but as I did, I saw something moving in the shadows behind the pool site. A figure, barely visible in the dim light, standing in the far corner of the yard. It was a woman, her long hair hanging in front of her face, her posture bent and unnatural. She was facing away from me, but I could feel her presence. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice shaky. The woman didn't move. Instead, the red liquid began to bubble around her, rising up from the ground as if the earth itself was coming alive. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back inside the house, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I locked every door and window, but I knew something was wrong. The land was angry, and whatever it had been hiding was not done with me yet. That night, the voices grew louder. The whispers filled the house, growing more urgent, more desperate. "Leave," they cried, over and over. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I could hear the soft splashing of water, the same sound I had heard when I first saw the red liquid. I knew something had been released, something that could not be undone. The next day, I couldn't take it anymore. I called the contractor, telling him to stop the work immediately. He was reluctant at first, but after seeing how distressed I was, he agreed. We decided to fill in the hole and abandon the pool project altogether. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Weeks later, I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore, not with the memories of what had happened in the backyard. I don't know what the red liquid was, or why it had appeared, but I do know one thing: there was something wrong with that land. And whatever it was, it didn't want me there. I moved to a new place, far from Elm Street, but I still hear the whispers sometimes, in the dead of night. I hear them calling from far away, telling me to leave, and I wonder, if I had stayed any longer, would I have heard something worse than the whispers? The end.